Police tape, blue lights, and the smell of oil on the water. That's what I saw when I stepped out that morning. 6 months of sweat and labor restoring my father's old lake, and now the HOA had called 911 accusing me of stealing community property. Standing behind the officers was Belle Hernandez, our HOA president, in her pink blazer, smiling like she'd just repossessed a piece of my family's history. They said I'd fenced off community heritage. I said I'd fixed a lake that died 20 years ago. The officer looked torn, but Belle wasn't. She jabbed her finger toward the water. "You can't just take what belongs to everyone, Mr. McMichael." That's the thing about people like her, she says everyone when she really means herself. When the police left, I noticed the old boundary post at the shore fresh saw marks like someone had tried to move it. That's when I realized this wasn't about a misunderstanding. Someone was trying to rewrite history with a handsaw. That night, I dug through my father's old files, yellowed deeds, survey maps, a faded easement contract from 1982. It gave the HOA permission to cross our land to reach the public side of the lake for 20 years. It expired in 2002 and became void if the lake stayed dry for more than 5 years. The lake had been a cracked basin for nearly 2 decades, meaning they'd had no legal access for 23 years. And yet here they were, calling the cops on me for blocking community rights. I couldn't sleep. I just sat there staring at that deed, thinking of my father's voice. "Son, when I'm gone, bring that water back." I'd done exactly that, but somehow it made me the villain in their story. The next morning, I went down to the county records office. The clerk brought out a box of files heavier than guilt itself. Inside were the receipts of truth, no renewed contracts, no payments after 1997, no valid rights at all. For 25 years, the HOA had been trespassing. But that wasn't even the worst part. They'd been collecting lake access fees from residents every year since. Money for a right they didn't legally own. By noon, I had photos, dates, and legal citations stacked on my table like ammunition. But then, that evening, I got a call that twisted my stomach. "Mr. McMichael said the woman from the State Water Department we received a federal complaint about your lake restoration. It claims you altered a navigable waterway connected to Clearwater Creek." My throat went dry. Federal jurisdiction could freeze the whole project, maybe even fine me for working without U.S. Army Corps permits. I didn't have to ask who filed it. Belle. That night I sat on the dock watching the moon shimmer on the water I'd brought back to life. I wondered if I'd made a mistake, if maybe I had pushed too hard. Maybe I should just let the HOA have their access and move on. It wasn't worth fighting. The government, was it? Then I remembered the saw marks on that post. The falsified map. The smirk on Belle's face when the cops showed up. No, this wasn't about water. It was about control. And I'd had enough of people like her deciding who gets to own peace. So I called that same state officer back and said, "If it's federal, then let's find out for sure. I want a full jurisdictional review." And then I filed my own complaint for illegal discharge and trespassing by the HOA. If Belle wanted a federal fight, she was going to get one. A week later, an HOA meeting notice landed in my mailbox, mandatory attendance to discuss community access concerns, which was HOA speak for public shaming. The room was packed, 40 residents, folding chairs, fluorescent lights, and Belle at the podium, all pearls and false confidence. She started with her speech, "Our lake has been shared since 1982. One man's selfishness cannot erase decades of community tradition." Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up slowly, my voice calm. "Mrs. Hernandez, could you please show the current easement agreement?" She hesitated. Her lawyer, a slick man named Walsh, jumped in. "Community access doesn't require formal documentation when it's long established." "Really?" I said, pulling out my phone. I mirrored the county document onto the projector screen. The image of the original contract glowed behind me, clearly marked, expired 2002. Below it, a payment ledger ending in 1997. For a moment, you could have heard a pin drop. One woman stood up. "So, we've been paying HOA fees for something that doesn't exist." Belle's voice cracked as she tried to regain control. "This meeting isn't about paperwork," but the room erupted. Half were shouting at me to reopen access. The other half were demanding to know where their money went. Belle's little empire was crumbling right there under fluorescent lights. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. Saw what happened. I used to be the HOA secretary. Meet me at Main Street Cafe tomorrow morning. Bring those records. No. Her name was Nora Blackwell. Plain-spoken, tired eyes, the look of someone who'd carried secrets too long. She slid a thick envelope across the table. Inside, handwritten board minutes from 2018. In the real version, the board discussed renegotiating access upon lake restoration. But in the official copy filed with the county, the line had been changed to community rights permanently established. She had the recording, too. Belle's voice was unmistakable. We both know the easement expired, Clayton, but the community has invested too much. Find me a legal theory that protects us or find me a new lawyer. That lawyer had resigned 2 weeks later. I sat there stunned, staring at the evidence of full-blown fraud. Nora's voice was steady. She's been collecting $200 per household every year since 2018, saying it funds lake maintenance. That's over $25,000 annually. The money goes through her husband's company. You weren't her problem, Devon. You were her threat. When I left that cafe, I knew I wasn't just defending my lake. I was about to expose a criminal operation hiding behind the HOA logo. 3 weeks later, we were in mediation court. The room smelled like coffee and tension. Belle sat across from me, still wearing that pink blazer, her lawyer ready with slides and legal jargon. Your Honor. Walsh began the HOA's long-term stewardship qualifies under federal law for community access to navigable waters. The judge frowned. Are you invoking federal jurisdiction? Yes, he said confidently. That's when I pulled out a letter from the state water department. Funny thing, I said. I requested that federal review myself. I unfolded it and read aloud, Parker Lake does not qualify as a navigable waterway. Jurisdiction remains with the state and local property owner. You could practically hear his case collapse. Then I hit them with the real bomb. The audio recording. Belle's voice echoed through the courtroom speakers. Find me a new lawyer. The crowd, HOA members, residents, started whispering, angry, confused. The judge banged her gavel, eyes narrowing. Mrs. Hernandez, are you aware this evidence implies document falsification and financial fraud? Belle stammered something about community good faith, but the damage was done. The judge ordered an audit and referred the matter to the Attorney General's office. That night I thought maybe it was finally over. I was wrong. At midnight I saw headlights flash across my driveway. 3 figures, Belle a man and someone carrying a crowbar. I hit record on my phone and watched them tear open my gate. They dumped trash bags into the filtration ponds, poured motor oil into the wetland system I'd spent months building. It wasn't vandalism, it was destruction with intent. I called Nora. They're sabotaging the lake, I whispered. It's all on video. 15 minutes later, sheriff's deputies arrived. They took samples, bagged evidence, and told me the phrase I'd been waiting to hear, Mr. McMichael, this is felony environmental vandalism. 3 days later, state prosecutors charged Belle Hernandez with fraud, falsifying records, embezzlement of HOA funds, and environmental crimes. Her husband was charged with money laundering. Walsh lost his law license before the week was over. When the verdict came, the courtroom was packed. 43 families, her victims, sat in silence as the judge read the sentence. Mrs. Hernandez, you defrauded your neighbors and attempted to destroy property under state protection. The court sentences you to 4 years in state prison restitution to all residents and a permanent ban from holding any community office. Her pink blazer looked dull under fluorescent lights. I didn't smile. I just looked at the judge, nodded once, and left. Outside, the air smelled like rain, fresh, clean, honest. I walked down to the lake that evening. The water was calm, a heron standing still near the reeds. I'd saved this place from decay, greed, and entitlement all at once. I stood there for a long time, watching ripples spread across the surface, and said quietly to no one in particular, truth doesn't drown.